Are you coming to the tree where they strung up a man? They say murdered three. Strange things that happen here. No stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree.
Coffee. Without it, we would never have had the Industrial Revolution. We'd all be still living in Europe in mud huts. Here in Laredo, we have the Organic Man Coffee Trike. 4501 McPherson, the best coffee on the planet. If you can't get to Laredo, you can order from the Organic Man Coffee Trike.shop. And welcome to the show. I'm your host, Chris James. And now I can say it. The end is near. The end of the year, anyway. As 2020 was staggering to an end like a corpulent marathon runner at mile 15, folks were all saying we had survived the worst year and all would now be right. I think I woke up January 1st in some other dimension. The world no longer even slightly resembles the one I had become accustomed to. People all acting as if running around hiding behind a cloth rag was normal. I hardly ever saw anyone with safety glasses to keep things out of their eyes. They were all content to protect the old pie hole and ignore the main access point to their bodies. The eyeballs. Yes, you catch a cold through your eyes. You catch a lot of viruses through the peers. People would be sure to cover their faces as they entered a restaurant, sit down and remove the mask. I guess the Black Plague doesn't drift around while food is on the table. As soon as the food was consumed, back on went the old masks. Incredible. Or as what's-his-name would say, inconceivable. But I don't think he knew what that word meant. As soon as it was announced we didn't have to wear them, my mask went into my bag and, well, I can't find it. It's probably down there underneath all the other garbage that I stuff in there that I don't want laying around the inside of my truck. I'll find it if I need it, but just about every place I go, it's an option. When I was a paramedic, I never used gloves to work on a patient. Only if I had to search a suspect. If I was working on some guy that was all bloody and nasty and horrible, even if he threw up on himself, well, the last thing I ever thought of was putting on the old gloves. The one thing that really got me was seeing people driving around all alone in their vehicles wearing a mask. I imagine some people wore their mask at home as well, probably even in the shower. Living in Texas, our governor declared there would be no longer any mask mandate. Holy cow, you'd think he'd announced there was no more toilet paper on the planet. Some folks went nuts, crying and screaming on the internet as if their lives were coming to an end. The gang I hang out with would swap stories of the insanity going on around us. Think about it. Just because there's no mandate, it doesn't mean you can't wear a mask. It just means the rest of us don't have to. The looks on some people's faces when I was walking around without my mask was entertaining. Now, I'm not a small, inconspicuous-looking individual. I tend to intimidate some folks, and nobody ever approached me and said I had to put a mask on, but they did give me some dirty looks. Though I really got a kick out of in the grocery store how they would make a huge arc all the way around to make sure they didn't get too close. Not everybody, just one or two people out of the pack. I hear it all the time. I'm expected to do my part to keep others safe. The way I see it, your health is your responsibility. I'm not going to follow you around saying, be sure to wear a warm coat, it's getting cold out. Not my job, and it's not the job of the government. If you don't feel safe walking around out in public, well, stay home, hide under the bed. Let the rest of us get on with our lives and stop getting in the way. To round out the end of the second weirdest year of my life, here are a few stories to make your day a bit nicer. Well, at least a little bit more entertaining. In Houston, they had an Amber Alert sent out on January 30th at 2:33. The alert listed Chucky, a 28-year-old, 3'1" doll, as being a suspect in a kidnapping of a 5-year-old boy. Chucky was further described as having red auburn-colored hair, blue eyes, weighing 16 pounds. He was described wearing blue denim overalls with a multicolored striped long-sleeve shirt. He was in possession of a kitchen knife prior to disappearing. The abducted child was described as a 5-year-old boy weighing 6 pounds, also with red auburn hair and blue eyes. The child's name was Glenn, and he looked strikingly similar to his abductor. He was last seen wearing a blue shirt and black collar prior to being abducted. The alert was sent out by email 3 times to describers of the Texas alert system. The Texas Department of Public Safety said they didn't have an exact number of describers to the system. Now, how many people's lives they interrupted with that one? I understand the need and the benefit of having an Amber Alert sent to my phone. It can be annoying. One time we were at the Texas Bigfoot conference, and suddenly about 30% of the phones went off while the alert toned. I had mine on silent. A few minutes later, maybe 20% more of the phones in the room went off. It was funny to watch all the folks trying to silence their phones, something they should have done earlier. What I really hate is being woke up in the middle of the night to see there's an Amber Alert out of Odessa, Texas. It's 430 miles between us and them. The Chucky Amber Alert turned out to be a test of the system. It wasn't supposed to go out over the air, but somehow it did. A good thing it was in the afternoon and not in the middle of the night. 16 people living in a small town called Rancho Vista, California, were infected with a rare and bizarre parasite. Rancho Vista has 400 residents. It's a small town north of Los Angeles. Folks went to their health care clinics with a number of symptoms such as skin rashes, abdominal pain, diarrhea, and weight loss. Tests were done on those people, and the diagnosis was startling. These folks had strongyloides, a kind of a roundworm that burrows into a person through the skin of their feet. Once inside a person, the worms enter the bloodstream and head for the lungs. In the lungs, they go about procreating until their numbers are sufficient to produce a cough reflex. The coughing causes the worms to break loose from the lungs and wind up in the stomach. The infection could have happened as much as 10 years prior to the symptoms showing up. An investigation showed the infection had been caused by improper sanitation in the small town. The wastewater plant wasn't doing its job. Fortunately, the treatment was quick. 1 dose of ivermectin, an antiparasitic drug. The town was ordered to fix its sanitation system or face a few more fines. We have a small town south of here named El Cenizo. The builder of the town boasted it had a modern sanitation system and a water treatment facility. Upriver was the water treatment plant, and downriver was the sewage plant. Kind of a no-brainer when it comes to putting things in. Way back, maybe 20, 30 years ago, Nuevo Laredo, right across the river from us, their sewer plant was upriver from their water plant. I could never figure that one out, but ugh. Patrolling the river, we would look at these two buildings all the time, but we never thought much about them until that storm. A hard rain with strong winds came through, and both buildings were damaged. The roofs and a few walls fell in. It turned out the water treatment plant was a steel pipe running in one side and out the other. There was no machinery in the middle to treat anything. Just a pipe. Folks were drinking that good old river water from the Rio Grande. The sewer plant was the same. Just a cement building with a pipe going in one side and out the other. Raw sewage was being dumped into the river and flowing downstream to San Ignacio. Chunky water on tap. The builder finally wound up in court and was fined into oblivion. He was determined to be too sick for jail time. A recent report from the Historic Hotels of America dubbed the Emily Morgan Hotel in San Antonio to be the most haunted hotel in the United States. Now, this was decided this year, in 2021. I wonder just how they go about determining the title. Most haunted. I still say we should go with the star system, like the restaurants and other hotels. No stars means no ghosts. 5 stars and your grandmother, who isn't even in the building, will see ghosts and spirits. Every haunted location on the planet has at one time or another been called the most haunted by someone. Before the building was erected, the ground of what is now the hotel was where the Mexican forces battled the Texans in the long barracks of the Alamo in 1836. Over 600 men lost their lives in or around the grounds where a hospital that was turned into a hotel was built. The Emily Morgan was initially used as a medical arts building from 1924 to 1976, which housed doctors' offices, and it served as a hospital. All along the outside are carvings of nasty-looking creatures. They don't look anything like what you'd expect to see outside a hotel or a hospital. The carvings were supposed to represent the various forms of illness and disease. The building had a morgue and a crematorium, providing for patients and their families from birth to death. The building was converted into modern office space for a while. Folks could rent out an office for just about any business. About a decade after that, it was turned into the Emily Morgan Hotel. The most haunted floors of the hotel are the 7th, 9th, and 14th floors, all of which have spooky history according to the report. Let's face it, the 14th floor is actually the 13th. Do people think that by renaming something they can make it better? Well, yes, they do. Just look at some of the nonsense going on in the press and the government today. Those floors were some of the most active in the reported psychotic. Those floors were some of the most active in the psychiatric ward, as well as surgery levels. A waiting area and a morgue, according to the HHA. That's the Hotel Association. Some guests who have stayed on the 14th, better known as the 13th floor, said that they could smell the scent of something like in a hospital, all those disinfectants and cleaning agents that they use. And on occasion, when they would open up the door to their room, they would see a hospital room instead. They would swing the door shut, and then a couple seconds later, thinking, well, that couldn't have been what I saw, they would open the door and, well, there would be their hotel room. My wife and I were checking into a hotel in San Antonio late one night. It was already after midnight. I unlocked the door and we started to walk in. There was somebody asleep in the bed. We quickly and quietly slipped back out and closed the door. Back down at the desk, we found out they had rented us a room that they had already rented someone else. We did get another room, but no discount or not even much of an apology. Just a, oh, I'm sorry, here, take this room instead. This wasn't some cheap roadside place. It was supposed to be an upscale location, but, well, at least the prices were upscale. A plumber identified as Just Justin, that's what they called him, okay, let me try that in a different way. A plumber identified as Justin, that sounds better, told the Houston radio station KILT he made a shocking discovery while working at a megachurch. There was a loose urinal on the wall, and the plumber removed some tiles to fix the problem. He had to unbolt the fixture, then redo the mounting bolts inside the wall. Once inside the wall, he found a bunch of donation envelopes. Pulling out a handful, the plumber could see dozens more. Each envelope was full of either cash or checks made out to the Lakewood Church run by Joel Osteen. The plumber contacted the church staff and showed them his find. In all, there were around 500 envelopes. The staff took the envelopes to their office and counted the amount of the hidden treasure. Police were also contacted since there had been a robbery back in 2014. Somebody had made off with $600,000. I doubt the envelopes found inside the wall would be that stolen money. Once a contribution is made, the envelope is discarded and the money is put in the safe. To me, this sounds more like one of the folks collecting the contributions that slipped into the bathroom and shoved the envelopes into the wall behind the urinal, with intentions of collecting them later. Once the envelopes had been checked and counted, the plumber was entitled to a 10% finder's fee. The church didn't tell the radio station how much the reward was, and neither did the plumber. A 13.5-foot, 750-pound alligator was killed in Vicksburg, Mississippi in September. The alligator was taken to Red Antler Processing in Yazoo City. The owner and operator of the processing shop pulled the stomach out and then he cut it open. It had been policy to throw out the stomach because nobody wanted to poke around in the rotten contents of a giant reptile. Nasty smelling stuff in there. Smith had seen and heard about other processors who had found some interesting and sometimes valuable things in alligator stomachs. So Smith cut the organ open and had a look. In the stomach, Smith found two ancient items. These were prehistoric indigenous artifacts, one of which continues to baffle the experts. As John and Stacy Edwards would say, scientists are baffled. Smith carefully collected the objects and then photographed them for a Facebook post that caught the attention of the director of the Surface Geology and Surface Mapping of Mississippi Department of Environmental Quality. Could they make that name any longer? Surface Geology and Surface Mapping of Mississippi's Department of Environmental Quality. Just call it the Environmental Office. He quickly identified the items as hunting tools that could date back as far as 6,000 BC. That would be 8,000 years ago. One of them was a teardrop-shaped metallic plummet. Experts say a plummet was used as a fishing weight years ago. They know this because, well, they're guessing. The trouble is, why would anybody carve such a fancy item to use to sink a fishing net? Odds were good many of these weights would get lost. Why go to such effort to carve something you might lose? This has led to a debate among scholars as to what the plummets were really used for. How about decorative jewelry? The plummet Smith had found was dated to be 2000 BC. That's 4,000 years old. The other object resembled a broken arrowhead. In fact, it was an atlat dart point. An atlat was a wooden handle used to throw a spear a long distance and very fast. The tip was dated back to 6,000 BC. People have been living in the Americas for over 12,000 years. Even though the bow and arrow came into use 71,000 years ago, you needed the skills and certain kind of wood to make them. An atlat was a lot simpler since there was just a stick and a wooden arm to set it in motion. Folks wanted to know how an alligator wound up with ancient tools in its stomach. Alligators make wallows. These gator holes are dug out by the alligator using a technique called wallowing. As the gator wallows around its hole, it is able to scoop mud and remove vegetation, allowing for more water to enter the depression in the land. Some of the debris being thrown around must have wound up in its mouth and then its stomach. There's no way of figuring out where the alligator swallowed these ancient items, since the animal could have dug them up anywhere along the river where it was killed. Alligator archaeology. Maybe this is something new to look into. November 6th, a staff member at the Florida Alligator Farm entered a crocodile enclosure. He saw 2 floating crocs, the shoes, and some discarded clothing. The staff member was worried there may have been a suicide by crocodile, someone killing themselves by jumping into the enclosure. He alerted the rest of the staff to come help look for the victim, or at least what might be left. The 3 inhabitants of the enclosure were all over 12 feet long. Let's face it, most people do not want to find body parts. It can be unsettling to stumble upon bits and pieces of what was once a living person. Some folks will lose their lunch in such a situation. The employees at the Alligator Farm Zoological Park in San Augustine, Florida, searched the enclosure, but they did not see a victim or any parts thereof. They did find a blood trail leading to the wall and then going up the 20-foot top. The authorities had already been called, and they soon arrived on the scene. As the police arrived at the alligator farm, they also were called to a home a few blocks away. The police had received a call from one of the neighbors who said there was a naked man crawling around her backyard. The naked man was covered in blood and suspected of being some kind of a lunatic murderer. It turns out the naked guy was the guy from the alligator farm, or zoo. It was his clothing and his shoes that were found in the crocodile pit. They had closed-circuit TV cameras, and they captured images of the man entering the alligator enclosure at about 7:45 p.m. the night before. He spent 4 hours in the pit, occasionally jumping from the wall into the enclosure. He didn't seem worried about the huge creatures that might consider having him for dinner. The man moved around the enclosure as if the 3 crocodiles were tame. He sat down on the bank of the pond, and he sat there for a while. One of the three crocs decided to see how he might taste. It latched on to the man's foot. Well, the man suddenly came to realize that crocodiles just might eat him. He thrashed about and somehow managed to get his foot out of the giant reptile's mouth without losing it. He managed to scale the wall and escape. Once out of the zoo, he was finding it hard to walk with one chewed-on foot, so he started crawling along on his hands and knees. For reasons only known to him, the man had jumped the fence into the house's yard, the house where he was discovered by the police, and began crawling back and forth as if he was looking for something. Or maybe he was looking for his marbles. The owner spotted him and was about to turn his dogs loose, but decided to call the police instead. When the authorities arrived, the man told them that he had seen an old man walking a pet alligator on a leash. The old man invited him to come to his house to see his other pets. Once in the house, the man told authorities the old man kidnapped him and locked him in the garage along with several dozen crocodiles. The man was going to become reptile food. This old man supposedly forced him to drink some kind of a black potion that was making him obey the old man's commands. This man, the crocodile food, was unsure on how he managed to escape, but he said he found himself in the yard where the police arrested him. The police decided the guy was nuts since there was no sign of any drugs in his bloodstream. Years ago, when I was still working the line, I announced during muster one night that I was sick and tired of sick people. I told the other agents I wanted to see some blood, some broken bones, things I could actually work on. I was just kidding, but a few hours later, I was called to come take care of some guy from Mexico who was injured. I arrived and I found a rather portly man with a broken arm and bite marks on both arms and ankles. I asked the agents what in the world was going on. It turned out this guy had jumped an 8-foot fence to hide from the patrol. As he landed in the yard, he was met by 3 huge Rottweilers. They proceeded to use the guy as a chew toy. The guy tried hitting one of the dogs, and so it latched onto his arm. This was how his arm got broken. As he was laying there, he started kicking at the dogs, and that's how he got both ankles chewed on. When the agents arrived and entered the yard, the dogs all sat in a circle around the intruder, wagging their tails, as if to show the agents, "Look what we caught for you." As I was bandaging the guy up, one of the agents said, "You told us you wanted some blood." I told him I was just kidding, but it was nice to get some of my skills to work. At the hospital, the doctor was busy stitching the guy up. We kept finding old scars on him. I asked him about the old injuries, and the guy said that these scars were old bites from when he had jumped a fence into another yard. It turns out he had done this twice before. Some people just never learn. In February, the police in Coatesville, Pennsylvania, entered a building to serve a search warrant for drugs. The house was being used to make crack and distribute heroin. In the kitchen, along with all the equipment needed to extract the illicit drugs, the police found a 3-foot alligator. The alligator was there to guard the products so unscrupulous people, that's other unscrupulous people, couldn't break in and steal their drugs. The police called animal control to come take the alligator away. A note to those of you that don't know, alligators are dangerous. There is no safe size. Even the babies will draw blood if you're not careful. A 3-footer can do serious damage to an arm or a leg. Too many people watching Steve Irwin jump on crocodiles and they think they know how it's done. The alligator was nicknamed El Chompo. If you don't get it, you need to watch the news once in a while. El Chompo was taken to San Agustin Alligator Farm and Zoological Park. The drugs and the drug dealers were taken in to a nice, all-expense-paid trip to the Crowbar Hotel. They were later admitted to the Greystone University. See what happens when you hang around people that I worked with all the time? Okay, for those of y'all who don't hang around law enforcement or criminals, the Gray Bar Hotel is a jail, and the Greystone University is prison. I tend to forget a lot of the folks don't understand some of the idiomatic words used in the groups I run with. In the Canadian Rocky Mountains, grizzly look for anything they can eat. Bears are omnivores, which means they eat fruit, vegetables, fish, and meat. Sometimes tourists. Tourists see pictures of bears eating berries and fruit, and they begin to think they can hand feed these huge creatures. This has led to more than one person losing an arm or worse. The most deadly bear on the planet is the polar bear. Not because it chases down people for food, but because people climb into bear enclosures in zoos to get their picture taken with the big friendly Coca-Cola drinking animals. I say if people do stupid things and wind up getting killed, the planet is probably better off. But then my wife tells me I have a very skewed idea on what's right and wrong. One grizzly was looking for something to eat. And one thing that grizzly really like are mountain goats. A good-sized mountain goat can weigh as much as 300 pounds. That would make any bear happy. Well, except the panda, which I'm not sure really qualifies as being a bear. More like a giant raccoon. You have grizzly out there looking for dinner, and the mountain goat isn't much of an animal for camouflage. They're white or gray. They're kind of easy to spot. Makes you wonder about what they're doing. Well, hikers in the Canadian Rockies found a dead grizzly laying on the side of the trail. Not something you see very often. What could kill a good-sized bear? The hikers contacted park officials who arrived to examine the body. They at first thought this might have been caused by poachers. Instead of finding a bullet hole, the officials found 2 puncture wounds in the bear's chest. After careful examination, they discovered the wounds had been caused by the horns of a mountain goat. The bear must have gone after a goat, thinking this would be a quick and easy meal. The bear would have stood up to crash down on top of the goat, but the goat aimed his head right at the chest, and when the bear came down, the horns poked 2 nice round holes in his chest. The bear was probably dead before he hit the ground. The goat walked away looking for some green stuff to eat. You don't often think of prey animals as being the victors in most animal attacks. It would be kind of like seeing a gazelle chasing a lion. Don't you know that goat was going to have bragging rights for the rest of his life? He's that guy, the bear killer. The cryptid community was still functioning, but on a much lower level. A Bigfoot was being seen all over the place. The BFRO website had a lot of reports. I tried to pick out only the better reports, but there were a lot of pages to sort through. January 10th, 2021, a man heard some Bigfoot howls in Rockbridge, Virginia. That's up north where my nephew John lives. Up around Dinosaur Kingdom 2. There was no Dinosaur Kingdom 1, but there is a 2. If you've never been there, you're missing a lot. It's a cool place. Anytime I hear recordings of Bigfoot howls, I use my dog's reactions to decide if it's real or not. If they run and hide, I figure it's the real thing. The howls happened in the evening at around 7 p.m. The witness noticed they were distinct from the usual sounds of coyotes, describing each howl as a very high-pitched wail that was in 3 intervals, each with a higher-pitched succession, from the next mountain ridge to the east. He said the sounds made the hair on his arms stand up. A police officer in West Texas had an encounter with something on the order of a Bigfoot. I should probably point out there is a town called West Texas and there is an area called West Texas. The town is just north of Waco, and there is West Texas, which is out west. I know this can be confusing. It's not my fault. They didn't ask me for my input when naming things. So we got a town and we got an area both called West Texas. Towards the end of July, the officer was out patrolling some of the out-of-the-way locations, looking for trouble, literally. If it's out there, you have to go looking for it. Trouble seldom comes looking for you. The officer was driving in between a cornfield and an apple orchard. The corn was 7 to 8 feet high. It was dark and warm night, so he had his windows down. And not finding anybody to check on, the officer pulled over and tried to relax just a bit, and sit and wait and see what happens. Something caught his attention over near the edge of the corn. There was a figure, a kind of a man shape, standing at the very edge of the road. It was as tall as the corn, so it stood 7 to 8 feet tall. The eyes looked all wrong. They glowed in the dark as if reflecting some unknown light. Reaching up behind his head, the officer grabbed his rifle and then exited the vehicle. He kept the image in sight the whole time. Only as his head passed the A-post did the creature leave his sight. Once out the door, the thing was gone. It was just a blur as it crossed the road and vanished into the orchard. Being a young officer, he gave chase. The officer would lose sight of the creature, only to catch sight of it soon after he quit running. It soon dawned on him that this thing was playing with him, leading him farther and farther into the orchard. A good thinking got the better of him, and he hot-footed it out of there to his unit. A few days later, after chasing a bunch of cows back into their pasture, the officer was talking to one of his fellow workers. The other officer said a year ago he'd been sitting in the same spot on the same road when something began shaking his vehicle. Whatever it was took off running down the dirt road. The second officer said he found a handprint in the dust on his unit that was twice as big as both of his hands put together. On January 28th, a report from Okaloosa County, Florida, involved a hiker who had stopped his car near Highway 85 to watch deer. What he saw instead, 10 minutes later, was a large black thing walk across the open field. It then vanished into the trees. According to the witness, the figure didn't look right and appeared hunched over or like its shoulders were rolled forward. Adding to this strange story, found a dismantled deer. That's a deer that was all pulled apart. The witness took some cell phone footage to accompany his report. Unfortunately, the images in the photographs, well, they were hard to see. It's what you call a blob squatch. You've got a dark figure that kind of looks like Bigfoot, but it's too blurry to really say. A lot of people will question, why are so many Bigfoot images blurry? Think about it. You've just encountered a 7 or 8 foot tall, hair covered creature in the middle of nowhere, and you're not too sure if this creature just might not be friendly. You've got your cell phone held out at arm's length trying to record the thing, while at the same time you're trying to convince your body that you should stay there and take photographs instead of turning and running like mad back home. That's why a lot of these photos are blurry. In Menominee County, Michigan, there was a report January 30th. A man was out hunting coyotes with friends when they heard strange noises. It sounded like wood knocks, like from any Bigfoot show. The witness later encountered 2 huge glowing eyes that were yellowish and very bright in the darkness. Using his scope, he got a better look. He discovered they belonged to a large creature that was watching him from behind a tree. The creature was crouching down behind a tree, and then it would stalk over to another tree and then turn and watch him again. Eventually, it just simply vanished into the woods. As September in Idaho, a trail cam caught what some are saying is the best Bigfoot video ever. The creature looks very tall and is seen walking past a small tree. You can see the muscles as the creature moves. It does not look like some guy in a suit. It looks like a real Bigfoot. The video was repeated, showing the same thing over and over, zooming in and out to make for some excitement, maybe. I would much rather have seen just the video played out as it was recorded. You can watch the video and make up your own mind. It's on YouTube under NVTV, and it's called Massive Idaho Bigfoot. Let me know what you think. I can already hear the trolls screaming that it's fake, but to me, it looked good. It looked real. Loch Ness has had a few sightings last year, or this year. Well, it depends on when you're listening to the show. If you're listening to the show at the end of December, it would have been this year. And if you're listening to it at the beginning of January, it will have been last year. Isn't time fun to try and explain? Okay, Loch Ness had a few sightings. There were 6 witnesses on 6 different occasions who were on the shoreline when they all saw what they believe was Nessie. In June, a young man visiting from Cambridge saw an unidentified creature for 2 seconds in the Urquhart Bay close to the castle. It was about 1:30 p.m., and he was scanning the loch's surface with binoculars from the castle. He said a hump came up going against the waves, and it looked kind of like a turtle's back. It was black with a greenish tinge to it. He reported that the weather was warm and sunny, and it had excellent visibility. In July, a man and his daughter visiting from Chester reported seeing an unidentified movement in the loch. They were hill walking above Fort Augustus and made the sighting at 3:20 p.m. They said a cruise boat had passed some 20 minutes earlier, but that there was no boat activity at the time of the sighting. Also in July, 3 brothers were visiting the loch from Surrey, and they took a trip on the Jacobite cruise boat. They said that towards the end of their boat ride at around 11:30 a.m., one of them spotted a black dot ahead. As they got closer, the dot became what looked like the head on a neck. It looked scaly and black, and then it just simply submerged under the water. July was a busy time for the monster. The last day a man was in a rest area, what they call a lay-by, when he saw something with his binoculars. Comparing it to a boat that had passed nearby, the thing must have been 2 feet high, standing up out of the water, and it was about 10 feet long. There were also 2 families in the same rest area, and they all stood and watched this thing as it moved across the water. In August, a man was on vacation, and he was on the water on board the Nessie Hunter. On the sonar, he spotted a 10-foot long something in the water under the boat. It looked to be at about 65 feet deep. There were also some reports from the Loch Ness webcams. At January 11th at 11:42, a regular webcam watcher noticed a V-shaped wake close to the left front side of the Loch shore while watching the camera. It was there for about 10 seconds when she saw something black surface for only about a second before it disappeared. On January 19th, another longtime Nessie watcher caught sight of something on the webcam at 2:20 p.m. He said that it was visible for about 20 minutes, but he managed to get a recording of it that's about 3.5 minutes long. He also explained that it was coming in and out of view for about 20 minutes, and he watched the webcam until dark, making sure that he didn't see any boat traffic nearby. March 12th, there was a sighting, March 17th, and March 26th. But each of these reports had just simply said that they saw something in the water. August 11th, a man was watching the webcam from Dallas, Texas, and he spotted a dark shape on his computer. It was about 3:56 between the clearing and the trees just above the shore in the middle of the frame. As something surfaced, it appeared to surface and dive, leaving a wake as it swam away. August 22nd, a dark shape was seen swimming from one side of the screen to the other. A woman from China was able to see a dark spot on September 6th. The spot was joined by a second that moved as if the two were connected. The dark images were visible for about 6 minutes. October 11th, a watcher saw something swimming across the loch, and it submerged as a boat approached and then resurfaced. Now, these reports were from people that were watching the loch from home. If you'd like to get in on the action, go to www.lochnes.co.uk/livecam. You can join their website, and then you can sit there and watch Loch Ness from the comfort of your home. And if you see something, you report it to them, and you get listed on their website. I received several ghost sightings for my next book, but very few of them actually took place last year. Most of them were from years ago. So I hunted down a few haunted sightings that were reported on the internet instead. There's an ambulance company that one of the witnesses was working for, and he had heard that rig number 12 was occupied by something. He didn't believe all these stories. He thought it was just stuff that people were telling him. He said it was just a bunch of hocus... Oh, no, wait, that's the wrong movie. He said it was just nonsense. He figured that his fellow EMTs were telling him these stories just to freak him out and make life a little more entertaining for them. He thought they were either messing with him or maybe they were letting their own imaginations get the better of them. Him and his partner were out waiting on a call, and they had been lucky enough to draw rig number 12. It was 3 a.m., and the Z-Monster was sneaking up on them. Those of y'all who have never worked shift work, especially the graveyard shift, don't know what you're missing. The person telling the story was scrunched down in the driver's seat. His partner was on the passenger side. Not that I would ever do so, but the gurney in the back is rather comfortable if you're super tired. I just don't lay on the backboard. That sucks. Been there, done that. It was dark and it was quiet. The radio was on, but nobody was talking. A muffled voice came from the rear, where the patient would have been. The driver thought it was just his partner saying something, and he asked her to keep it down so he could rest. From the rear of the unit came, "Oh my God, I'm dying." That got both of them to sit up and look around. They could hear heavy breathing coming from the darkness behind them. They sat there not saying a word, trying to figure out what was going on in the empty rear of the ambulance. Something turned the oxygen bottle on in the back. They could hear the hiss of the flowing gas. The driver and the passenger both jumped out of the cab and ran around to the back doors. They looked at each other, then at the doors. One asked, "Do you think somebody got in while we were asleep?" Neither one of them had an answer. The driver reached over and he flung the doors open. The lights came on, and the cabin was empty. All those stories that the other EMTs had told suddenly sounded a lot more believable. Back when I was a firefighter, Station 1 was haunted. I worked at Station 2. People would see someone looking in the back window in the middle of the night. The window was just a small glass just above one of the bunks. It was policy to keep a piece of plywood that was cut to fit shoved into the opening so the window was covered. Sometimes the plywood would fall out, all on its own, for no reason. Anytime there was a new guy at Station 1, we'd be sure to call over and tell them all the details about the face in the window. The face would be looking in from the outside, pressed up against the glass. The thing is, you can't stand by the window because the air conditioner was right against the wall. Folks believed the ghost was a captain who had a heart attack and died while at the station. Having a lot of folks at home, either working from there or not working, has led to an increase in UFO sightings. A lot of people get kind of excited about the Pentagon coming out saying there are UFOs that they can't explain. That old video from the Nimitz back in 2004 is getting worn out. I've seen it too many times. They keep showing it on every UFO show as if it's breaking news. The 2017 TikTok video is at least a little bit newer, but not much better. It's only 4 years old. Daryl Sims keeps asking, what does the military have that's been seen in the last year? The government isn't saying. They have too many skeletons in the closet to come clean with anything without it being drug from them. Are we to believe the military hasn't filmed any more UFOs since 2004? They haven't released any reports or said anything about anything that has been seen in a while now. There's been no new reports, no new videos. Are we to believe that UFO action has simply stopped, even though the witnesses have said they've been seeing this stuff all the time? At the UFO conference in Edinburgh, a lot of folks were asking about the July Congress report on UFOs. I said all they'll do is tell us a bunch of things we already know, and then they'll try to confuse things. July came, and the all-encompassing report was less than exciting. The Pentagon wasted the entire document telling us what they were going to tell us someday, without telling us anything. The funny thing about the new view on UFOs from Washington is that the naysayers are still saying UFOs aren't real and only crazy people see them. We recently had that sighting on Jockman Road here in Laredo. A woman spotted what can only be described as a flying saucer. There's no other way to put it. She managed to take a photograph of it, and she sent it to the LPRS. The same week, a couple friends of mine saw the same object flying over Saunders. It wasn't alone. There were 7 of them. I've talked about a lot of UFO sightings all over the U.S., so here are a few from Northern Ireland. Police received 8 sightings in Northern Ireland during 2021, an increase from the 6 reports they had in 2020. This could be because most folks are locked up inside their homes, unable or unwilling to step outside. That's in 2020. I would find reasons to go someplace. The grocery store, for one. I would go buy a box of batteries. Oh, I need these. I'm not much good at being a sheep. As someone made a report of a spaceship and flashing lights in Downpatrick area on January 17th. In May, police received 2 sighting reports, one of white lights, which were seen after a helicopter had flown over in the Mogberry area, and then they saw an odd disk which was seen in the skies in the Slemish area of County Antrim at the end of the month. I hope I'm not pronouncing these places too badly. I can pronounce Mahia, which is spelled Mexia, pronounced Mahia. In July, there was a report of a strange image on a CCTV in a house in Newtown Abbey area, and a dome-shaped object with 8 lights in the sky reported in Saintfield area. In September, a report was received in Lisburn area of aliens in the bedroom. There was no more to the report. Just somebody said they had aliens in their bedroom. I checked 10 different sites online. All 10 had the exact same story, word for word. Nobody went into any details on a report of aliens in someone's bedroom. What was found when the police went to investigate? Nobody is saying. In October, a detained patient reported having been abducted by aliens. The final report of the year was an unusually bright light in the sky in November. UFO sighting reports on a Police Service of Northern Ireland, that's PSNI database, include unidentified flying objects, UFOs, aerial phenomenon, unidentified aerial phenomenon, and lights in the sky, as well as aliens and extraterrestrials. A PSNI spokesman said that no investigations had been carried out in relation to these incidents. I guess that includes the aliens in the bedroom. Had they said there were intruders, the police would have shown up, but saying aliens, well, they just didn't bother. If you're going to call the police and say you've got aliens in your bedroom, you might better just say it's intruders. That way when the police show up, they'll see what you see. And Nick Pope, who used to investigate reports of UFO sightings for the Ministry of Defense, said it was possible that more people spent more time at home during the pandemic may account for the rise in reported sightings. It's difficult to say what lies behind the small increase in sightings, he had said. I've met Nick several times now. I thought about inviting him on the show, but decided I would much rather just visit with him and enjoy the evening and let him enjoy it as well. I imagine guys like him get a little tired of everybody with a podcast coming up to him and bothering him for 15 minutes to be on their show. Here we are saying goodbye and good riddance to 1 year, and I hope we're going to step into a better one next year. I keep hearing folks saying it can't get any worse. This is turning into more of a challenge than a statement. Let's see what craziness can happen in 2022. It's kind of like saying, gee, it's awful quiet in here while standing in the emergency room in a hospital. It's kind of like saying, well, it can't get any worse than this while anywhere, any bad situation. Just keep in mind, it can always get worse. Just look around at some of the craziness that you'd never thought you'd ever see before in your entire life, and you can find it out there now. If you enjoyed the show, great. If not, sorry. I did my best. It's the end of the year and it's been a busy week. Maybe next year I'll do a better job. If you'd like to contact me, write to strangethings@arkanasa.com. And until next year, this is Chris James for Strange Things, and hope your year is going better than some people's.
Are you coming to the tree where they strung up a man? They say murder three. Strange things that happen here, no stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree.